The morning light spilled across Manhattan, turning the steel and glass skyline into a reflection of fire and silver. Inside the soaring headquarters of Reed Biosolutions, a man who moved like a quiet shadow pushed a Janitor S-cart across the polished marble of the grand lobby. His name was Michael Clark, though few ever bothered to learn it. He kept his head down as if the world above his gaze was not meant for him, as if every step he took should be silent enough not to disturb the ambitions towering around him. The crisp navy uniform he wore was clean but worn at the seams, a reminder that his life had once been different. He maneuvered the mop with calm, steady movements, trying to lose himself in the repetition, in the simple comfort of cleaning a floor that was not his mess to begin with. Men and women in perfectly fitted suits strode past him, their conversations sharp and fast, floating with talk of multi-million-dollar research deals, market expansions, and cutting-edge breakthroughs. None of them saw the janitor working beneath their reflections. They walked through the world as if he were made of air, and in many ways he preferred it like that. A flash of soft color caught his eye. A small girl sitting stiffly in a waiting chair near reception. 7-year-old Lily Reed, with tangled light brown hair and a little fox plush pressed so tightly to her chest it seemed she feared someone might steal her only link to safety. Her feet, too short to reach the ground, dangled motionless. There were no restless swings, no curious questions, no childish excitement in her gaze. Instead, her eyes stared down into the shiny tile beneath her shoes, as if she were trying to disappear into the floor. She barely flinched when the receptionist's gentle voice offered her hot cocoa. The girl only pulled the fox closer, shoulders rising in fear at the attention. Michael recognized that expression too well. It was the look of a child trying desperately not to break, because breaking hurt too much. He told himself to keep working, to stay invisible as always, but his gaze lingered longer than it should have. The elevator chimed at 9:15 a.m., and Charlotte Reed, CEO, innovator, the power behind this empire, stepped into the lobby. Her presence commanded the air, her heels tapping with purpose, her tailored suit crisp enough to cut. Yet beneath that steel exterior was a woman unraveling thread by thread. Exhaustion clung to her eyes. Grief tightened the corners of her mouth. When she came to kneel before her daughter, her tone softened into a tremor. "Hi, sweetheart," she whispered, voice barely holding together. But Lily didn't look up, didn't respond, just squeezed the fox a little harder, as if it were the last piece of a vanished world. Charlotte tried again, but words crumbled under the weight of silence. A nanny approached, ready to escort Lily to the private playroom upstairs. The moment the woman reached for her, Lily's breathing stuttered, a flicker of panic sparking in her stillness. Charlotte's jaw clenched, pain she couldn't fix, a job she couldn't quit, a daughter she couldn't reach. "I'll be back as soon as I can," she promised, though her own eyes betrayed the uncertainty. The elevator sealed Lily away once more, and Charlotte stood frozen, stripped of power no company on earth could restore. She straightened herself only when 2 executives returned, masks of professionalism snapping back into place. The world required strength, even when her heart was drowning. Michael stared at the water gathering beneath his mop. A tear had slipped from his cheek without permission. He wiped it away quickly. No one noticed the janitor crying. No one noticed the janitor at all. And that was safer, because if anyone truly looked at him, they'd see the remains of a father who once lifted his laughing son to the sky and believed the future was bright. They'd see the ghost of Noah, forever 5 years old, forever gone. As Michael continued to work, his eyes drifted once more to the elevator where Lily had disappeared, as if the sadness she carried reached out like a hand grasping for something, anything, that might anchor her. One child above was silently falling apart. One man below had already shattered. Neither yet knew the other existed. But fate inside this glass palace was quietly turning, preparing for the moment when two broken hearts would collide and begin, without realizing it, to heal. High above the city, the 30th floor of Reed Biosolutions glittered with immaculate glass walls and cold, efficient silence. In the CEO's private wing, Charlotte Reed stared at her computer monitor, though the words before her had blurred into meaningless black shapes hours ago. A psychological evaluation report filled the screen, the 9th in as many weeks, each one a fresh verdict of helplessness. Subject: Lily Reed. Diagnosis: acute traumatic stress response, severe withdrawal from social interaction, rejection of therapeutic contact, little to no progress expected without intensive psychiatric intervention. Charlotte shut the laptop with a force that rattled the desk. She pressed the bridge of her nose, fighting the migraine that never seemed to leave. Just months earlier, she had stood at the top of her world, admired, unstoppable, happily married to Daniel Reed, the man she believed she'd grow old with. He had been her balance, her laughter, her heart. And then, in a split second of tragic fate, his plane fell out of the sky. The call came while she and Lily waited at the airport holding a "Welcome Home" sign decorated with stars. Lily had smeared blue paint across her own nose while making it. She had laughed, a sound Charlotte hadn't heard since. Now that laughter felt like a fairy tale from another life. Charlotte walked toward the small room designed just for Lily, a sanctuary nobody had entered without permission since Daniel Ash's death. The walls were painted with pastel scenes of forests and smiling woodland creatures. Soft lights glowed from cloud-shaped lamps. Shelves overflowed with toys that had once been loved. In the corner, Lily sat curled tight, silent as a forgotten doll, rocking slightly back and forth, clutching that little stuffed fox like a lifeline. Charlotte knelt carefully. "Sweetheart, Dr. Valdez wants to try something new today. We can go together. It might help." The reaction was instant. A piercing scream ripped from Lily's throat, raw, terrifying, as if her tiny body could not contain the panic. "No doctors!" she sobbed, throwing the fox toward the wall before scrambling to retrieve it with shaking hands. "I want Daddy!" Charlotte froze, tears burning behind her eyes. She reached out, but Lily recoiled, burying her face against her knees, as if the world itself were too dangerous. Every failure carved deeper into Charlotte's chest. She was a woman who could negotiate billion-dollar deals, command rooms full of brilliant minds, and lead thousands with unwavering authority. Yet here, with her own daughter, she was small and powerless. With a trembling voice, she whispered, "I want him too, baby." That night, once Lily was asleep, sedated by exhaustion rather than comfort, Charlotte retreated to her office. Manhattan's glittering city lights reflected on the windows, mocking her. They had once represented power. Now they only emphasized how alone she was. Her desk was scattered with memos, half-signed contracts, and a photograph from their last family vacation. Daniel stood on the beach holding Lily high on his shoulders, her hair catching sunlight like gold. Charlotte traced their faces with her fingertip, her throat tightening. She would have given up every penny, every ounce of prestige to bring that moment back for just one more second. But life wasn't a negotiation she could win by pressing harder. Her phone buzzed, her assistant's voice cautious. "Ms. Reed, the board is asking whether your personal situation is affecting your leadership." Affecting her leadership, as if grief were something with a scheduling conflict. Charlotte wanted to laugh, dark, bitter laughter, but she only sighed. "Tell them I'm managing," she replied, though the truth was she was barely holding anything together. She hung up and leaned back in her chair, staring into the dark void of the city. She had saved lives with her work. Her company had cured diseases that once felt unbeatable. Yet she couldn't save the one child who needed her most. Across the city, Michael Clark was finishing his shift. While others rushed home to families, he boarded a packed subway car, invisible among strangers. The rumble of the train didn't drown out the ache that lived inside him. In his small, dimly lit apartment in Queens, he paused in front of the only decorations he owned. Pictures of his son Noah taped to the wall. A missing front tooth. A smile so bright it made the world feel fair. The weight of memory pressed hard against him, but he still whispered the same words every night. "Good night, buddy." He walked then into his spare room, a workshop of sorts. Scraps of fabric, blocks of wood, pieces of thread scattered the table. No matter how heavy the day, he always sewed or carved something. It was a ritual, a connection to Noah that time couldn't sever. Tonight his hands moved slower, thoughts tangled around a silent little girl clinging to a plush fox. He didn't know why she haunted him already. Maybe because sorrow recognizes its own. He stitched carefully, imagining small fingers gripping the toy. A fox, a comfort, a bit of light in darkness. Neither Michael nor Charlotte knew it yet, but the one thing Lily needed wasn't another doctor or another room full of toys. It was someone who understood what it felt like to lose the sun and still wake up in the cold. Someone who could sit with her in silence without demanding she smile again. Someone like a quiet janitor with heartbreak stitched into every clumsy little toy he made. Someone who once loved and lost a child too. 6 years earlier, Michael Clark's life had been painted in bright, ordinary colors. The kind of happiness that felt unbreakable because it was built from laughter, bedtime stories, and tiny shoes scattered across the living room rug. He had been a preschool teacher at a small private academy in Brooklyn, the kind of man who knelt to tie a child's shoe without a second thought, who believed every kid deserved to feel seen. He would walk through his classroom each morning like a gentle breeze, fixing a fallen crayon, offering a high five, smiling at the chaos and wonder of childhood. And at home, love waited for him in the form of his wife, Emily, a pediatric nurse who smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic, with tired eyes that still sparkled when she talked about helping children heal. But the brightest joy in Michael's world was their son Noah, 5 years old, with a laugh that could thaw winter and a mop of blonde hair that refused to stay combed. Noah loved building crooked Lego castles and crawling into Michael's lap to hear a bedtime story about knights who protected their dads from dragons. "One day," Noah would say with a gap-toothed grin, "I'll build a real castle and you can live there like a king." Michael would ruffle his hair and answer, "As long as you're there with me." Those were the kinds of promises he thought life would allow them to keep. But life, as he learned, had no regard for fairy tales. It was a cool autumn afternoon when everything unraveled. The leaves were turning gold, scattering across the roads like confetti tossed for a celebration no one ever intended. Emily picked Noah up from school while Michael finished a lesson about shapes and colors. He remembered glancing at the clock, excited to see them both. He remembered the sudden knock on the classroom door. He remembered running, sprinting through the hallway, out the front doors, into the street where he hailed the first cab he saw while the world blurred around him in a panic he could not breathe through. Hospital lights were too bright, too sterile, too cruel. Doctors spoke in hushed tones and avoided his eyes. A truck had swerved out of control. Emily survived, but barely. Noah didn't. One look at the doctor's face, and Michael collapsed as if gravity had been ripped from the earth. Sound became impossible, only a ringing roar inside his skull. Emily woke later, broken and sobbing, convinced she didn't deserve to be alive, that the accident was her fault, that she should have died instead. Michael held her, whispered that none of it was her doing, but his words hit a wall he could never climb. Their apartment became a monument to absence, Noah's room untouched, a silent shrine of dinosaur pajamas, crayon drawings, and the stuffed dog still waiting on his pillow. Nights were the worst. The bed was too big, the quiet too loud. Emily's grief twisted into guilt, and one morning Michael woke to find a letter on the kitchen table. I love you, but I can't live in this pain. Please forgive me. She never returned home. He searched everywhere, hospitals, shelters, every place he imagined she might drift toward, but she was gone, swallowed by her sorrow. He was left alone in the ruins of a life that once felt perfect. Teaching children became unbearable. Every laugh reminded him of Noah's laughter. Every small hand reminded him of a hand he would never hold again. So he quit. He left the school quietly, unable to give a reason that made sense to anyone. His world shrank into a small apartment in Queens, dark but safe from reminders of joy. The only thing he kept from his old life was a craft he and Noah once shared, making silly little toys from scraps. A tiny wooden car from popsicle sticks, a lopsided teddy bear stitched together from an old shirt. At first, every stitch hurt. Every carved edge reopened wounds. But slowly, quietly, those little creations became the only moments he felt close to his son again. He made them not for any purpose, not for any child, but for the love he could no longer give directly. Sometimes he imagined Noah sitting beside him, offering suggestions or giggling when a toy turned out a little crooked. And though the pain never left, those moments helped him breathe long enough to survive another day. The world no longer saw Michael Clark, not the teacher, not the husband, not the father he once was. What remained was a man who swept the floors of a skyscraper where no one knew his story. A man who had already lost everything before the world stopped noticing him. And yet in the quiet hours of the night, as he stitched another small toy by the dim glow of a lamp, the faint echo of Noah's voice would whisper to him, "You were still the best dad in the world." Michael had always imagined grief as something loud, an explosion, a storm, a scream. But in reality, it settled into his life like dust, silent and impossible to clean away. Months after losing Noah and Emily, he learned how to look alive while feeling nothing. He stopped answering calls from the few friends who tried to help. He avoided parks filled with children's laughter and took the night shift wherever possible just to avoid sunlight, because bright mornings reminded him too much of the days Noah used to wake him by bouncing onto his chest shouting, "Daddy, the sun is awake! We have to be too!" Now he preferred nights when the world slept, when no one expected joy from him. His savings dwindled from medical bills and funeral costs until he was forced to move out of the apartment that once smelled like pancakes and bubble bath. His new place in Queens had little furniture, just a bed, a kitchen chair, and a small table where his old sewing kit lived. He found work wherever he could: dishwashing, warehouse labor, driving delivery trucks. Each job was temporary, his existence drifting like a man without a map. Eventually, a position opened at a janitorial company that serviced corporate buildings across the city. "No interaction with customers," the manager had said. "People won't bother you." That was exactly what he wanted. To never be noticed, to never have to explain, to never hear someone say, "I'm sorry for your loss." Because those words only stabbed deeper into a wound time refused to close. But even in that chosen invisibility, he carried one stubborn ritual forward: making toys. Every night after work, he reached for thread and fabric, wood and glue. His hands stitched pain into shape, trying to give form to something that had shattered. On the worst nights, his tears soaked into the cloth. And yet, each finished toy, a bear with mismatched button eyes or a wooden rabbit with crooked ears, felt like a message to Noah. "I am still trying." Those fragile creations made the silence more bearable. They let him pretend he wasn't drifting alone. Sometimes he whispered stories into the air, imagining Noah listening from somewhere he couldn't see. "Once upon a time," he would say quietly, "there was a brave little boy who built castles from hope." He never finished those stories. The endings hurt too much. Hope, he believed, was a luxury for people who hadn't lost everything. He kept his heart locked away, convinced that nothing good could ever come from opening it again. Life would only take more. At Reed Biosolutions, he became part of the building like the walls and vents, necessary but unseen. He swept floors, emptied bins, and polished surfaces that reflected people who still had something to live for. They passed him without acknowledging his existence, their heels and voices echoing around him like ghosts of another world. And that was fine. He didn't belong with them. They planned futures while his heart was anchored in the past. But the human heart is strange. It remembers how to care even when it believes caring will kill it. Sometimes Michael found himself watching the employees celebrate small victories, cheers over coffee hugs after promotions, and for a fleeting moment he would feel warmth tug at the edges of his chest, only to push it away, terrified of the hurt that always followed attachment. So he built emotional walls as tall as the skyscraper he cleaned, walls with no doors, no windows, only survival. Until one afternoon, in an empty hallway lined with glass and ambition, he heard a suppressed sob, soft yet piercing, a sound he recognized immediately. A child crying, trying not to be heard. His whole body locked. It was the exact sound Noah had made during his nightmares, when he woke terrified that his parents would disappear if he fell asleep. Michael's pulse hammered in his ears as he followed the sound. On the floor behind a tall marble column sat Lily Reed, her tiny shoulders trembling, face buried in her arms, the fox plush caught under her chin like a breathless plea for comfort. She was trying so hard not to break. The sight cracked something deep inside Michael, the walls he had built, the beliefs that protecting himself meant avoiding all connections. He didn't think. He simply moved, almost against his will, his heart guiding his steps rather than his mind. It was the first spark of life he had felt in years, a connection through shared loss. He knew pain could destroy a child if ignored long enough. And though his wounds ached and his heart was terrified, one truth suddenly felt undeniable. He couldn't walk away from a child in pain. Not again. Michael approached Lily slowly, his hands open and empty, the way one might approach a frightened animal that had been hurt too many times to trust again. Her quiet sobs echoed in the polished hallway, each one tightening something in his chest until he could barely breathe. He lowered himself to the floor near her, close enough to show he was there, far enough not to feel intrusive. For a moment he just sat, letting the silence speak for him. He remembered too clearly how adults often rushed to fix sadness, to hush it, to pretend it wasn't there. Children needed presence more than solutions. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "That looks like a really brave fox." Lily stiffened, clutching the toy harder. She didn't look up. Her tears soaked its fur, her body shaking with the effort of staying small and invisible. Michael shifted slightly, pulling something from his pocket. "I made this," he murmured, holding out a small teddy bear with mismatched button eyes and an uneven smile. "He's not perfect, but he listens really well." For a long, fragile second, nothing changed. Then Lily's wet eyes flickered toward the bear, just a glance, quick as a heartbeat, but it was enough to tell him she had heard him. He placed the toy gently a few inches from her, not pushing it into her hands, simply offering. "His name is Scout," he said softly. "He's very good at keeping secrets." Lily stared at Scout like she was deciding whether or not to let this odd little creature into her guarded world. Her fingers loosened around her fox just a bit. A tiny, trembling hand reached out and touched the bear's paw, barely brushing it with the tips of her cold fingers. Michael swallowed, his throat tight. That small moment felt enormous, like watching a flower push through concrete. "He's all yours," he whispered. "No strings, just someone to sit with you." Lily didn't respond with words. She hadn't spoken in months, but she pulled the bear closer, pressing it to her chest beside the fox. Her breathing slowed. Her shoulders eased just enough to show she felt a sliver of comfort. Michael felt tears threaten again, but he blinked them back. This wasn't about his pain. This was about a child finding one tiny reason to feel safe. The elevator chimed at the end of the hall, and Charlotte appeared, her face strained from hours of meetings and swallowed grief. She froze when she saw Lily sitting on the floor, not screaming, not panicking, not shutting down, but hugging a new stuffed bear with cautious fondness. It was the most alive Charlotte had seen her daughter since Daniel's death. She hurried over, confusion and hope battling in her expression. "Lily?" she breathed, kneeling. Lily didn't push away. She didn't scream. She simply held both toys tighter and leaned subtly, almost imperceptibly, toward the janitor sitting beside her. Charlotte's eyes flicked to Michael, surprised, almost suspicious. Who was this man? How had he managed something every specialist had failed to accomplish? Michael stood quickly, flustered. I'm sorry," he stammered, already stepping back as though he'd broken a rule. "She was upset. I thought I could help." Charlotte opened her mouth, searching for the right response. The elevator doors behind her began to close again, and a passing executive called out, "Miss Reed, investors are waiting upstairs." She waved him off, eyes never leaving the scene before her. She saw her daughter's trembling hand still gripping the toy he'd given her. Charlotte's voice softened. "Thank you," she said, fragile gratitude woven into the words. Michael nodded, unsure what to do with the warmth of that acknowledgement. He was used to being invisible. Kindness aimed at him always felt like a spotlight he didn't know how to stand under. "Anytime," he said quietly, though the word anytime carried the weight of a promise he didn't fully understand yet, a promise that scared him. Because caring meant risk. Connection meant pain. And yet, when Lily looked up at him with those wide, wounded eyes, something inside him whispered that maybe he had a purpose again, small but real. As he stepped away, rolling his cart back down the hall, he didn't notice the way Charlotte watched him go. She saw the way his shoulders hunched like a man who had forgotten how to take up space. She saw the compassion in his cautious movements. And for the first time in months, she wondered if hope might arrive in unexpected, humble shapes. Lily pressed Scout against her cheek, eyes softening. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The bear had already said enough. Charlotte couldn't shake the image of her daughter sitting calmly beside the janitor, holding that handmade bear like a fragile piece of courage. It defied every rule of logic she had been clinging to. Therapists, psychiatrists, specialized programs, none had reached Lily in any meaningful way. Yet there she was, allowing proximity to a stranger she should have feared. Later that evening, after Lily was asleep with Scout nestled beneath her chin, Charlotte sat alone in her home office, scrolling through security footage with slow, careful movements. She wasn't looking for faults. She was desperate for understanding. She watched as Michael approached her daughter, not with the rushed panic adults often used with distressed children, but with patience, gentleness, and a level of respect she hadn't seen since Daniel was alive. Every action was intentional, the distance he kept, the way he spoke quietly, offering comfort instead of demanding attention. She zoomed in slightly as he handed Lily the bear. His hands trembled, not from fear of accusation, but from the weight of his own vulnerability. That moment was not random. It was born from familiarity with pain. Charlotte leaned back, rubbing her temples. Who was this man who could break through protective walls Lily had cemented around her heart? She searched the internal company database. Michael Clark, night custodial staff. That was all. No picture, no details. Just a name and a role that should have meant nothing, but it meant everything right now. The next morning, Charlotte walked quickly through the halls of Reed Biosolutions, rehearsing what she might say. But when she saw Michael mopping near the executive lounge, all words vanished. He looked up just long enough to recognize her and immediately stepped aside, assuming he was in her way. "Mr. Clark?" she called gently. He froze as though hearing his own name startled him. "Yes, ma'am?" His voice was polite but wary, his shoulders tightening like he expected reprimand. Charlotte took a breath. "I saw how you helped my daughter yesterday." His eyes widened slightly with worry. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line. She was crying and I—" "You didn't cross anything," Charlotte cut in, softer now. "You helped her. You helped her in a way nobody else has." He swallowed hard, gaze dropping to the floor. "I just offered a toy." "It wasn't the toy," Charlotte insisted. "She trusted you, even if it was only for a moment." Michael had no answer for that. Trust wasn't something he expected from anyone anymore, especially not a child in so much pain. Charlotte studied him quietly, noticing the exhaustion beneath his eyes, the same exhaustion she saw in her own reflection every morning. "You understand her fear, don't you?" she asked, no judgment in her voice, only recognition. Michael flinched at the question. Grief carved its shadow across his features so clearly that Charlotte's breath caught. "I lost my husband," she continued softly. "Lily lost her father. We're drowning, and I don't know how to pull her out." For a moment, Michael considered staying silent, keeping his past buried where it couldn't hurt him. But something in Charlotte's trembling composure pushed him to speak, voice rough and slow. "I lost my son." Charlotte's chest tightened as she felt her heart split open again, not with her own pain this time, but with empathy. "I'm sorry," she whispered, and those words, so often weaponized, landed instead like a hand reaching out gently in the dark. Michael nodded slightly, swallowing emotion that threatened to choke him. "Sometimes kids just need to know they're not alone in the dark," he murmured, "that someone else has been there and survived long enough to tell the story." Charlotte exhaled shakily, absorbing his words like a lifeline. "Would you consider spending time with her again, just as a friend?" The question stunned him. "I'm just a janitor," he replied, as if the title disqualified him from being useful anywhere outside of a supply closet. "You're someone she trusts," Charlotte corrected. "That's more valuable than any title in this building." Silence formed between them, not awkward, but fragile, like both were afraid one wrong word would shatter what had just begun. Michael finally gave a small nod, though worry lingered in his eyes. "If she wants me there, I'll sit with her." Charlotte's relief was immediate and visible, but she didn't smile. Not yet. Hope was still too dangerous. "Thank you," she said, and for the first time in months, gratitude didn't feel like defeat. As Michael watched her walk away, Scout the teddy bear tucked under Lily's arm flashed again in his mind, and he realized something terrifying and miraculous all at once. For the first time since Noah died, he wanted tomorrow to come. The next few days unfolded like cautious miracles, small, fragile steps that neither Michael nor Charlotte dared to label as progress out loud, afraid the word itself might scare it away. Whenever Michael finished his early morning routine in the lobby, he would linger a moment near the elevator, waiting to see if Lily would arrive with Scout tucked safely under her arm. She always did. The nanny would guide her to the waiting area, but as soon as she spotted Michael, she quietly slipped from the nanny's grasp and sat down near him on the polished floor, her tiny legs folded beneath her like she was afraid of making too much noise. Michael never rushed her, never asked anything of her. He simply sat nearby, pushing his cleaning cart aside, sometimes stitching a new toy from bits of fabric he carried in his pocket. Lily watched with wide, careful eyes, as if each thread he pulled was a story she was learning to read. She didn't speak, but she began communicating through gesture, tapping his arm when she wanted to see what he was sewing, nudging Scout into his hand when she wanted him to fix a loose button, scooting just an inch closer each day, as though testing whether the world would collapse if she trusted someone again. Michael, for his part, felt a warmth he couldn't name begin to unfurl inside his chest, a warmth he had feared he buried with Noah. Sometimes he would look at Lily and see not his son, but a child, simply trying to hold on someone who deserved safety and comfort, and all the softness life had denied her. He told himself he was helping her, but in truth, she was helping him remember how to breathe without drowning. Charlotte watched from a distance, sometimes through glass walls, sometimes from a few steps away, memorizing every rare spark of calm Lily showed around Michael. She even caught a fleeting half-smile one afternoon when Michael accidentally pricked his finger with a needle and made a dramatic, exaggerated wince just to make Lily feel more comfortable. Charlotte's heart skipped in a way that frightened her. Hope was dangerous, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough to welcome it back. One morning, Charlotte approached, while Lily sat on the floor with Michael, watching him stitch a tiny fabric bird. "Is that for Scout?" she asked softly, trying not to disturb the moment. Lily didn't flinch away. She simply nodded once, quickly, eyes still fixed on the bird taking shape in Michael's hands. Charlotte's voice cracked with a feeling she had missed: gratitude. "You're giving her something I can't," she told him in a quiet voice, meant only for him. Michael shook his head. "She already has everything she needs," he replied. "I'm just helping her remember it." Those words lingered with Charlotte long after she walked away. But not everyone viewed this fragile bond with admiration. One afternoon, while Michael was kneeling beside Lily, the head of human resources, a stiff woman named Linda Grant approached with clipped heels and a suspicious gaze. "Mr. Clark," she snapped, "a word, please." Michael stood, feeling shame punch into his stomach before he even knew why. Linda crossed her arms. "You are not authorized to interact with executive family members in this manner. If Ms. Reed requires child care services, she has the means to seek professionals." Lily froze, panic rising instantly in her shoulders. Charlotte stepped in before fear could burst into a scream. "That's enough, Linda," she said sharply, stepping between them. Linda blinked in shock. "Ms. Reed, I was only reminding staff of appropriate conduct." "He is helping my daughter," Charlotte cut her off, "more than any professional has been able to." Linda's disapproval radiated like a storm cloud. "It's a liability. He's not trained, he's not vetted." "He has my trust," Charlotte stated, voice like steel snapping. Michael stared at the floor, a familiar belief gnawing at him. He didn't deserve trust. He didn't deserve to be near children. Not after losing Noah. But then he felt a small tug at his sleeve. Lily, eyes wide with fear of losing him too soon, pressed Scout into his hand, an offering, a plea. His throat tightened. Linda opened her mouth again, but Charlotte cut her off with a final definitive statement. "I will handle this personally. That will be all." Linda's lips tightened into a thin, bitter line as she walked away, and Michael exhaled shakily. Charlotte turned to him, softer now. "I'm sorry. She doesn't understand." Michael shook his head. "I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not," Charlotte insisted, though she knew trouble was coming anyway. Anything this unexpected, this beautiful, would always be questioned. Because miracles rarely looked professional. As Charlotte walked away with Lily for a doctor's appointment, she saw her daughter glance over her shoulder checking to see if Michael was still there. He gave a small wave, and Lily clutched Scout tighter, drawing comfort from knowing that kindness, even unlikely kindness, might stay. For now. But fragile miracles rarely went unnoticed for long. The building buzzed with rumors as employees caught glimpses of the CEO's silent daughter sitting comfortably beside a janitor who seemed more like a ghost than a staff member. Whispers traveled faster than truth, faster than caution. Some called it touching, others called it suspicious, and for Linda Grant, it was the perfect opportunity to question Charlotte Reed's leadership yet again. One morning, Charlotte was standing near the boardroom doors when a low murmur rose from the corridor. "It's inappropriate," one executive whispered. "What if something happens to the girl?" "Grief or not, the CEO cannot rely on janitors for child care," another scoffed. Charlotte's grip tightened around her tablet. The walls of this company had always been ruthless, but never before had they taken aim at the part of her life that was sacred. Her daughter was not a talking point. She was what remained of Charlotte's heartbeat. That same afternoon, while Michael was adjusting a vent panel in a corridor, two uniformed police officers entered the lobby. His entire body went rigid. Police authority spotlights on mistakes he never intended to make. His hands instinctively clenched at his side, breath caught in his chest. He had done nothing wrong, but grief had a way of convincing him that trouble always found him. Lily, sitting quietly beside him, sensed the shift instantly. Her eyes widened in fear as she clutched Scout, pressing into Michael's shadow for protection. The officers approached Charlotte first, speaking in low voices. Then Linda Grant inserted herself into the conversation, gesturing sharply toward Michael. Something about her tone made Lily panic. She grabbed Michael's shirt and buried her face against him, trembling like a leaf in a storm. It happened fast. Cameras caught everything. Charlotte rushed forward just as the officers moved toward Michael, asking him to step away from the child. Lily's breath turned to rapid gasps, her chest heaving. She was seconds from a full-blown meltdown. Michael froze, terrified of making it worse. He lifted his empty hands slowly, trying to show he was no threat to anyone. His voice trembled. "It's okay, Lily. You're safe." But Lily wasn't listening. She was already gone inside her fear. She sobbed wordlessly, body shaking, tiny fingers gripping his sleeve like she believed letting go meant losing her safety all over again. Charlotte threw herself between the officers and her daughter. "Enough!" she snapped, voice sharp as breaking glass. "You will leave him alone." "Ms. Reed," one officer said carefully, "we received a report concerning inappropriate proximity." "From whom?" Charlotte demanded, though she already knew the answer. Linda's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Charlotte's anger burned hotter. "He has done more for my child than anyone here," she said, voice quivering with conviction and fury. "And if you ever insinuate he is a danger again, I will personally see to it that your career ends faster than you can type up another false report." Linda's cheeks flushed with humiliated rage. The officers backed off, realizing this was no longer a matter they could rationally pursue. The crowd dispersed slowly, but not before a few final stares of judgment lingered on Michael like stains he couldn't wipe away. He stood motionless, breathing hard, guilt and fear pounding through him, as if he'd committed a crime simply by caring. "I'm sorry," he whispered, barely audible. "I didn't mean to cause a scene." Charlotte shook her head. "The only people causing problems are the ones who can't understand compassion." Lily pulled back from Michael just enough to look up at him, her cheeks blotched red from crying. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't withdrawn. She was afraid. For him. That fear held meaning. Charlotte noticed, and her heart broke and mended all at once. But there were consequences. That evening, a board meeting erupted into accusations and threatening ultimatums. One executive slammed his palm against the table. "Our CEO's personal issues are affecting this company's reputation." Linda stood with false concern dripping from her words. "We must ensure the safety of the child. A janitor is not qualified." "He is qualified to offer kindness," Charlotte fired back, "which seems to be in short supply among you." A vote followed, a warning issued. One more incident, any disruption, and Charlotte's leadership would be reviewed. The company she built was now using her love as leverage to break her. After the meeting, when the building had gone silent, Charlotte found Michael in a maintenance closet, folding rags with robotic focus. He didn't hear her at first. His mind was elsewhere, reliving the worst day of his life, terrified that his presence had harmed another child. "I should keep my distance," he murmured into the quiet. "I don't want to take anything else from a family," Charlotte stepped forward. "You didn't take anything. You helped bring something back." He still couldn't lift his eyes. Grief had taught him to look down. "Thank you for defending me," he said, voice strained. "You didn't have to." "I did," Charlotte replied, "because you're the first person Lily has chosen to trust since she lost her father." Michael inhaled, sharp and unsteady. Lily's trust was a gift he didn't feel worthy of. But maybe, just maybe, he could learn to be someone who deserved it. As Charlotte walked away, Michael stared at his hands that had once held his son, and today had held hope. Hope was dangerous. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to run from it, even if the rest of the world already judged him guilty for daring to heal. The next morning brought a tense, uneasy quiet to Reed Biosolutions. People avoided eye contact when Michael entered the lobby, their stares filled with assumptions shaped by rumors rather than truth. Charlotte spent most of the day on calls behind closed doors, fighting unseen battles to keep her role, her dignity, and the fragile progress Lily had made. Meanwhile, Lily grew restless. She paced the playroom like a caged bird, glancing constantly at the clock and the door, waiting for the only person who made the building feel less terrifying. When Michael finally appeared, pushing his cart around the corner, Lily bolted toward him with an urgency he'd never seen before. She wasn't screaming, she wasn't panicking. She was desperate, and she ran straight into him, burying herself in his jacket as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. Michael froze, arms hovering uncertainly, before he slowly wrapped them around her in a careful embrace. It was the first time she had willingly touched anyone since the accident. The moment should have been peaceful, a sign of healing, but instead it sparked fresh conflict. The nanny rushed over, alarmed, reaching for Lily. "Honey, come here!" Lily clung tighter, shaking her head violently. Her breathing quickened, panic rising at the thought of being separated from the one safe place she'd found. Michael tried to ease her away, whispering reassurance, but she cried harder, terrified he would vanish like everyone she'd loved. Finally, Charlotte arrived, breathless. When Lily saw her mother, she didn't release Michael. She simply looked at Charlotte with pleading eyes. "Please don't take him away from me." Charlotte's heart broke under that silent request. She knelt beside them, smoothing her daughter's hair. "It's okay," she whispered. "He can stay." Those words calmed Lily instantly. She loosened her grip and allowed Michael to gently set her back on her feet. Charlotte stood, offering Michael a small, tired smile. One that said, "Thank you," one that said, "Don't leave us," one that said, "I'm trying so hard to be strong." That evening, as the building grew quiet, Lily tugged Michael's sleeve and pointed down the hallway toward the rooftop garden, a restricted space employees rarely used. Michael hesitated, but Charlotte gave a soft nod. "Go ahead," she murmured. "She wants to show you something." Together they rode the elevator up, Lily holding his hand like the world might crumble without that connection. When the doors opened, the rooftop welcomed them with fresh air and twinkling city lights. It was breathtaking, a secret pocket of peace above the chaos. Lily led him toward a corner where a small memorial had been set up. Flowers, a framed photograph of Daniel Reed smiling wide beneath summer sun, and a tiny hand-painted rock that read, "Daddy's Star." Michael's breath caught. This was where Lily came to remember the man she lost. She kneeled and placed Scout in front of the picture, as if introducing her father to a new friend. Then, for the first time in months, she spoke. A soft, broken whisper, barely blowing through the air. "Daddy." Tears burned behind Michael's eyes. This child had carried her grief in silence for so long that even one word felt like a miracle. Lily's small hand found Michael's again, and she looked up at him, eyes shimmering with a question she couldn't voice. He knelt and nodded gently. "He would love Scout," he whispered, "and he would love how brave you are." Lily blinked slowly, a silent thank you, before resting her head against his shoulder. He stayed there with her, letting the night breeze carry their shared sorrow into the stars. But miracles came with shadows. The following morning, Lily arrived, without Scout. Her eyes were wild, breath shallow, fear radiating off her like heat. She dragged Michael's sleeve urgently, motioning toward the elevator. Something was wrong. Charlotte, pale and frantic, rushed after them. "She woke up screaming," she explained shakily. "We can't find her toy." Michael knelt to Lily's level. "We'll look for Scout together," he assured her. That was enough. Lily tugged him toward the rooftop, but when the elevator doors opened, Lily bolted forward, only to freeze in horror. The garden had been cleared overnight for a corporate event. The memorial was gone. Flowers, gone. Daniel's photo, gone. And Scout, nowhere. Lily's scream ripped through the air like a wounded animal. She ran forward, searching, overturning potted plants, clawing at the ground with shaking hands. "Daddy!" she cried, the second time she had spoken in months, and Michael's heart shattered. Charlotte's voice trembled. "I didn't know they were clearing this space." But Lily was beyond comfort. She turned and ran, through the door, into the stairwell, disappearing before anyone could catch her. Charlotte gasped, "Lily!" Michael didn't hesitate. He sprinted after her, his pulse pounding with terror. Down the stairs, through dim service corridors only staff used, Lily's small sneakers echoed ahead of him. "Lily, please stop, you're safe!" he shouted, fear making his voice crack. But she didn't stop. She disappeared into an old, unused wing of the building, dark hallways leading to a storage area where no sunlight reached. She pushed open a heavy metal door and vanished into the shadows. Michael followed, breath burning, his voice desperate. "Lily!" Then, silence. She was somewhere in the dark, somewhere scared, somewhere alone, exactly where he once had been, and he would walk through fire before letting that happen again. The darkness in the unused wing swallowed sound and hope with equal hunger. Michael stumbled forward, pulse hammering in his throat as he called Lily's name again, trying to keep fear from cracking open inside him. His flashlight beam cut through dusty air, landing on stacks of abandoned equipment and crates draped in spider webs. It felt like searching through the belly of a forgotten beast. Then he heard it, a tiny hiccuping sob, muffled by concrete walls. He followed the sound, weaving past old filing cabinets and broken furniture until he reached a corner where Lily crouched behind a stack of boxes, hugging her knees, shaking violently. "Hey," Michael breathed, lowering himself slowly to the floor. "It's me. I'm right here." Lily lifted her head, face streaked with tears, lower lip trembling. "Daddy's gone," she whispered, the third word she had spoken in months, each syllable a wound torn open. "Scout's gone." The smallness of her voice made his heart collapse in his chest. He wanted to promise her everything would be okay, but he couldn't lie. He knew too well that sometimes things didn't come back. Instead, he opened his arms gently. "I promise I won't let you be alone," he said. Lily stared at him for a long moment, eyes swimming with grief, before she launched herself into his embrace. He wrapped her tightly against his chest, holding her the way he wished someone had held him the day he lost Noah. Charlotte appeared in the doorway, breathless, relief flooding her expression when she saw her daughter safe. She knelt and reached out carefully. Lily didn't run this time. She leaned into her mother, too, letting both of them hold her. For the first time since Daniel's death, they shared their pain instead of carrying it separately. Michael stood after a moment, stepping back as Charlotte gathered Lily into her arms. His job was done. At least, that's what he told himself. By the time they reached Charlotte's office, the board members were already waiting, fury simmering beneath forced professionalism. "This chaos must stop," Linda Grant snapped, standing with arms crossed like a judge ready to deliver a sentence. "We can't run $1 billion company around a child's tantrums and a janitor's involvement." Lily stiffened at the harsh tone, shrinking back fearfully. Charlotte stepped protectively in front of her, voice low and dangerous. My daughter is not a problem to be managed. Your leadership has become a liability, an executive shot back. We need stability, control. Control? Charlotte repeated, bitterness rising. I lost my husband. My daughter lost her father. And all you can think about is public perception. We are thinking about the company, Linda said, venom disguised as concern. You must choose your role or your distractions. The word hit like a slap. Michael stiffened. Lily grabbed his hand, refusing to let go. Charlotte looked at the board, then at her child, and made the decision that the world would soon judge her for. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and declared, I choose my daughter. The room erupted. Voices clashed in anger, but Charlotte ignored them, holding Lily close and guiding her toward the elevator. She turned once more to Michael. Come with us, she said softly. He hesitated, fear and disbelief warring inside him. He didn't belong in the world of CEOs and corporate battles. He was just a broken man with a mop and a pocket full of small, stitched hopes. But Lily tightened her grip with her tiny hand, and that was all the answer either of them needed. Charlotte nodded with gratitude, her eyes silently promising safety. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one truth became undeniable in that moment. This unlikely trio was no longer held together by coincidence. They were bound by loss, and now by love's first fragile thread. Charlotte didn't wait for permission or signatures. She led Lily out of the boardroom battlefield, leaving behind gasps, angry muttering, and 1,000 unraveling corporate expectations. Michael followed, still unsure whether he was walking toward a future he didn't deserve or running from a past that refused to let him breathe. In the elevator, silence pressed against them, heavier than the skyscraper above. Charlotte held Lily close, while the little girl clung to Michael's sleeve, refusing any distance between them. When the doors opened to the rooftop again, this time empty, cleaned, stripped of memories, Charlotte's composure cracked. They erased him, she whispered, voice shaking. Like he never existed. Michael crouched beside her, his own grief flaring painfully in response. A place doesn't hold love, he said quietly. People do. Charlotte met his eyes, really saw him for the first time without barriers or titles between them. She realized this man understood everything she was fighting to protect, because he had already lost it once. Lily sat down on the cold stone and looked around, searching for anything familiar. Her lower lip trembled. She curled into herself, the panic building again. Michael reached into his pocket on instinct, fingers brushing against something small fabric. He pulled out a tiny, half-finished toy he had stitched during his break earlier that morning. A little star made of gold fabric with uneven points. He had no reason why he made it at the time, but now he understood. He offered it gently to Lily. For Daddy's star, he whispered. Lily stared at it, tears spilling silently. Then she placed it carefully where her father's memorial had once stood, her small voice breaking as she whispered, For Daddy. Charlotte's breath hitched. Michael felt a familiar sting behind his eyes. That one tiny gesture felt bigger than the entire sky. Suddenly, the rooftop door slammed open. Linda Grant marched out like a storm, the director of security at her side. Ms. Reed, Linda snapped, employees are reporting that your child is out of control and that this man, Charlotte interrupted sharply, stepping directly into Linda's space, has saved my daughter in ways you never could. Linda didn't back down. He is trespassing outside his role, and you are actively compromising company protocol. If you refuse compliance, we will escort him off the premises. Lily's panic erupted instantly. She threw herself at Michael, small fingers clutching his jacket like a lifeline. No! she screamed, a loud, crackling sound that made Charlotte's heart collapse. Michael's instinct was to protect, but he froze under the weight of authority, staring him down. "Ms. Reed," the security chief said, voice firm, "please step aside." Charlotte stood taller, fire blazing in her eyes. "You touch either of them," she said slowly, "and I will bury this company in lawsuits so deep no one here will ever see daylight again." The security director hesitated. Everyone in the city knew Charlotte Reed did not make empty threats. Linda's face tightened with frustration. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. "No," Charlotte replied, taking Lily's hand in one and Michael's in the other. "I'm finally doing something right." She turned away from them all and led her family, yes, family back toward the elevator. Down they rode through floors full of people who didn't understand what strength looked like. Through hallways that once ignored a grieving janitor and condemned a hurting child. To a front lobby that would never see them the same way again. When they stepped out into the cold New York evening, Charlotte inhaled deeply, letting her lungs fill with freedom instead of fear. Lily stayed pressed against Michael's side, scoutless, but not alone. And Michael? He looked at the streetlights glaring through winter air and realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't walking into emptiness. He was walking with someone. Someone who needed him. Someone who trusted him. Someone who believed he was worth staying for. And that was a miracle he never expected to survive long enough to witness. They didn't speak much on the drive home. Lily sat tucked between Charlotte and Michael in the back seat, leaning her small head against his shoulder as if afraid he might slip away when she blinked. Charlotte kept glancing at them through the rearview mirror, seeing something miraculous take shape in real time, the return of trust, fragile but real. Traffic crawled through the city like a slow-moving river of tension, headlights washing over their faces in cold flashes. Michael stared out the window trying to steady his breath. Just that morning, he had been a janitor sweeping away forgotten lives from polished floors. Now he was being driven away by a CEO whose world had crashed into his own in ways he never could have predicted. Charlotte finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "I'm sorry for what happened today. I should have protected you sooner." Michael shook his head. "You protected Lily. That's all that matters." Charlotte's eyes flicked toward him with gratitude. "Still," she murmured, "you deserve better than being treated like a risk just because you care." Michael didn't know how to respond to that. Caring had been his greatest blessing once, and his greatest punishment. When they reached Charlotte's townhouse, the night air felt colder than before. She unlocked the front door, turning on warm lights that chased away shadows. The home was beautifully designed high ceilings, framed art, children's toys neatly arranged, but it all felt painfully hollow. Daniel's absence lingered in every corner. Lily walked to the living room and sat on the rug, staring at the spot where Scout should have been waiting for her. Her breathing stuttered, tears welling again. Michael knelt beside her, feeling her fear buzz through her small hands. "Hey," he whispered, "I have an idea." He reached into his coat pocket again. He hadn't realized how many unfinished toys he'd been carrying around, little pieces of hope he never expected to use. He pulled out another scrap of fabric, a small square of patterned blue material, the kind Noah used to love on his pillowcase. With steady hands, he began stitching right there on the floor, thread weaving through fabric in quiet, precise movements. Lily watched with trembling anticipation. Charlotte sat nearby, hands clasped over her heart as she realized just how healing this simple act was. After several minutes, Michael presented the finished creation, a tiny blue heart with uneven edges and a single button sewn in the center. "This isn't Scout," he said gently, "but it can help hold his place until we find him." Lily clutched the heart carefully, like it was something alive and delicate. She pressed it to her chest, tears falling silently, but they weren't the same desperate tears as before. They were softer, grieving but guided. Charlotte's voice was a near whisper. "You're incredible with her." Michael let out a shaky breath. "I'm just trying to help her feel safe." "You're doing far more than that," Charlotte replied. She hesitated, then added, "You're healing her." His eyes flicked up, surprised and unsure. Healing was a word he never imagined being associated with again. Later, after Lily fell asleep holding the heart Michael had made, Charlotte brewed a pot of tea and led him into the kitchen. She looked exhausted, strong, but tired from fighting a war on too many fronts. "You don't have to stay," Michael said gently. "I should go before I cause more trouble." Charlotte's expression hardened, not in anger but in determination. "You are not trouble," she said. "You are the only reason Lily is smiling again." Her voice softened. "Please, stay a little longer tonight, just until she's completely calm." Michael hesitated, fear whispering that he didn't belong here, that happiness wasn't for people like him. But then he remembered Lily's hand gripping his jacket, her trust pulling him forward, and he nodded. Charlotte exhaled in relief, her shoulders dropping tension she'd carried for too long. She poured tea for him, and for the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to sit in a place that felt almost like a home. He listened to the soft hum of the house, the kind of silence that didn't hurt. And for a brief moment, surrounded by warmth and possibility, he dared to wonder if life could give him something new, something worth staying alive for.